Welcome to the Podcasting Secrets Show, where successful creators share their best stories, secrets, and strategies. I'm your host, Nathan Gwilliam. Hello, incurable creators, and welcome to this episode of the Podcasting Secrets Show. Today, I'm joined by Gary Arndt. Gary is the very successful host of the Everything Everywhere Daily Show. He was recognized by Time Magazine as having one of the top 25 blogs in the world. He's been awarded the Travel Photographer of the Year 3 times in North America. His podcast has achieved more than 1.5 million downloads per month, and he's ranked as the #1 history podcast in the United States on the Apple Podcast charts. And he's secured top 10 positions in 63 different countries. Thank you so much for being with us today, Gary.
Thanks for having me.
Can you start off by just sharing with us a little bit about yourself and your life?
Went to college, was recruited on an academic debate scholarship, did pretty well, placed in the top 10 in the country my junior and senior years.
Nice.
After that, I remember I coached high school debate for a couple of years, and then one of my college roommates contacted me, says, yeah, you should see this thing I'm working on. It's called the World Wide Web. It's really neat. And so I remember going to visit him, and he had a modem, and he pulled up a web page for the Library of Congress. It was some display that they were doing from the Vatican Museum that was visiting. And it was the first web page I ever saw. And I eventually moved up to the Twin Cities where he was working, and he started working on a product to do database integration with websites, which at the time, this is the early 90s, was very difficult to do and very expensive. And then he had companies said, well, we'd like this for our website. So I started doing websites using his product, and then another, and I hired a friend and a friend. Next thing you know, I'm 28 years old. I have a company with 50 people, and I sell that to a big multinational company before the dot-com bubble burst. They send me on a trip around the world for 3 weeks. First time I ever got to travel internationally. Got to visit, Tokyo, Taipei, Singapore, Frankfurt, Brussels, Paris, and London on a whirlwind 3-week trip. And that kind of got me the bug. I went back to school for a few years to study geology and geophysics, and realized I didn't want a career in academia. So I came up with the idea of selling my home to travel around the world. 2007, I sold my home, started traveling. I thought I'd travel for a year or two. Ended up being 13 years. Had a pretty successful travel blog, developed some pretty good followings on social media, and became pretty well known as a travel photographer, completely self-taught. Bought a camera for the first time when I started traveling and just taught myself how to use it. And when the pandemic hit, I didn't like where blogging was going by like 2018, 2019. It had all become being on these big platforms, whether it was social media or just everyone was just doing SEO. That's all they were doing. And when I originally started it, blogging was social media. People went to your blog. They subscribed to it on an RSS reader. And it was to the point where 90% of traffic for every blogger I talked to was coming from Google. And so what they were doing is they were all just writing the same SEO content, and it was garbage. And I started thinking about doing a podcast. I had been podcasting since 2009. I was a co-host on a show called This Week in Travel. But the pandemic kind of threw a wrench into everything because the whole travel and tourism industry just vanished basically overnight. And literally, I can give you a day by day. February 28th, 2020, I come home from my last international trip in Portugal. The next day, I get COVID. I have COVID the first week of March. And then over a 2-week period in the middle of March, everything shuts down. 95% of my income disappears. All the contracts that I had were canceled. And after a while of this, I realized that I needed to do something else. I couldn't rely on travel anymore. And I had an idea for a podcast back in 2018. I had the artwork commissioned and done. I had theme music. I had the license for it. I bought that. But I never pulled the trigger on it because my idea at the time was to do long 2-hour episodes, maybe once every 2 weeks. And I did the math, and it just didn't work out business-wise. So when the pandemic hit, I went back to the idea, but I rethought it. Rather than doing longer episodes infrequently, I thought about doing shorter episodes more frequently. And I had a friend that launched a daily podcast, and he did very well with it. And he said, yeah, it was one of the best things I ever done. So I went back and I did the math, and I realized that this makes a lot more sense. And there's a lot of factors that go into growing a podcast, one of which is time, which you can't really do anything about other than stick with it. But one of the other ones is the number of episodes you produce. The more every bit of content that you create is an opportunity for discovery. So I decided to do shorter daily episodes. And first thing I did is I created a list of 100 show ideas in a Google Doc. And then on July 1st, 2020, I launched the first show. And I have been doing it ever since. Just hit 40 million downloads last month. And the show's doing pretty well. I think that encapsulates my life.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm looking at your show right here. That is a pretty impressive run that you've had since 2020, and not that long of a time to have achieved so much success. And I know you're doing some things a little bit differently, like you've talked about, a little shorter episodes, a lot more content publishing daily. And I know there's a lot of experts that agree with you. Russell Brunson makes a promise where he says, I promise if you publish every day for a year, you'll be financially free. And he's really big on promoting.
It took me about 18 months, but yeah. And then it really started to take off after that, where I went after 18 months, I was making some money. And then by 2.5 years, I was making quite a bit of money.
Do you agree with that promise that Russell Brunson makes, so that if you publish every day for a year, you'll be financially free?
It depends what you're talking about. There are a lot of podcasters who I want to talk about this subject, so I am going to make a podcast on it. And that's all it is. And that's not a compelling premise for a podcast. And I just went to Podfest and I met podcaster after podcaster that were doing the same thing. It's like, I have a child with this disease, so my podcast is me talking about this disease. Okay? You're not an expert. You're just talking about it. It's more like a therapy session than it is for you, rather than it is something for people that would be either entertained or informed. And there's a lot of those shows where people, it's just like, I just want to talk about this. There's nothing wrong with that. You can do that. Do anything you want on a podcast.
But maybe you're not providing enough value that you're going to achieve that.
Right.
Success.
I violated so many rules in making my podcast, right? You've probably heard this. You got to niche down. The riches are in the niches. My show is literally called Everything Everywhere. It is the anti-niche show. I cover, there are certain things I don't cover, but from like an educational standpoint, I cover history, geography, mathematics, you name it. The show I'm working on right now that I'll be recording later tonight is Why is the Alphabet in that Order? So, and I get into the Phoenician alphabet and the Greek alphabet and the Etruscan alphabet and things like that. But basically, I made the show that I wanted to listen to, right? I worked backwards, not the show that I wanted to talk about, although I do enjoy doing the show. And my show is not an interview show. It's a monologue show. I write a script. That's where all the work of my show actually comes in. I write a 2,000 word term paper every day, basically. And that's the show. So yeah, I mean, I've done so many things that you're not supposed to do. People said, oh, don't quit your day job. You don't want to do that. Well, my day job quit me. So I threw everything I had into doing this show, which I think helped. I had a lot of time on my hands, which allowed me to do a daily show. And a lot of the people that do daily shows, they're doing just like 5 minutes of like extemporaneous thinking on a topic. It's like, today we're talking about doing your best. And I think, everyone should, whatever it is, but it's just like this sort of fluff content. Whereas what I'm doing is like kind of hard content. At least it involves quite a bit of research and writing. So I don't even know if what I did can or should be replicated by a lot of people, because it's very difficult.
You have to put in the time it really comes down to value, right? You can't just do the fluff like you were talking about. You got to show up with the value for every episode.
Yeah. It's not just talking about stuff, whatever, even if you're interested in it, even if it's a very important thing, you have to provide more than that.
Okay. So you talked about a few minutes ago, you broke every rule. I want to go deeper into that because I think that's really interesting. Because I've heard those things, you got to niche down 3 levels to find your topic. I love that you didn't do that, and you created your own voice, your own message, your own unique show. What are some of the other rules that you broke?
Most people, it's not a rule, but the vast majority of podcasts are interview podcasts. There's nothing wrong with interview podcasts. I've done it. I may do one in the future. We're talking right now. So that's a very common thing. But I made a conscious decision to not have an interview podcast because there are so many of them. And many of the podcasts I listen to that are interview podcasts, the ones that deal with like, higher level affairs, not technology stuff, but like, it's a lot of authors and it's a lot of the same people over and over. And I see this on several YouTube channels that they're just recycling and sharing the same guests, which gets kind of boring. So talking about the stuff I'm doing, that's the other thing, is that because there is no focus, the lack of focus has become the selling point for this show. When I hear a lot of people give podcasting advice, I think it's kind of a dumbbell strategy. There are 2 different types of shows that can be successful. And of course, there's stuff in the middle. But by and large, if you want to simplify the model, there are the very big shows like the Joe Rogan show and things like that. They don't necessarily have a focus. He just talks to people he finds interesting, right?
Yeah.
My show's the same way. I don't really have a focus. I just talk about things I find interesting. And these shows have very large audiences and primarily, almost exclusively, make their money from advertising. And if you want to make your money from advertising, you pretty much need to have a large audience. On the other end of the spectrum, there are people I know that do very well with their podcast, but they don't have large audiences. And this is the riches in the niches community.
Right.
Those people are going to have usually a product or service that they sell, and the podcast will be a means of selling that product. And I think both of those models can work very well, but I think a lot of times people giving podcasting advice are just talking about that smaller model, which is in some ways, to be honest, much easier, I think, because you only need to cater to a smaller community. But that other option, the approach that I took, I think is viable and ultimately can scale a lot larger, but it's probably harder to do.
With 1.5 million downloads, going this route of getting a lot of traffic and selling advertising, can you give us a rough idea of how much somebody with your size of podcast can generate in a month?
It's well into the 5 figures in a month.
Per month that you're generating. Okay.
And I believe I can 10x my show still.
Yeah, that's right. How are you selling your ads?
I have a company that does it. I'm with a network. They handle all the ad sales.
Perfect.
Given the nature of my show and the fact that I'm producing a show every day, 1, I would not have the time to do it properly. And 2, I believe you have to know what you're good at. You have to know what you're bad at. And I am bad at selling. I can do the show production. I think I am uniquely suited to doing this show. But if I had to sell stuff, I would fail miserably.
I think you'd be better than you think. But I hear your point, focusing on what you know and you're good at, you're best at.
Well, and I've learned a lot about how ad sales work. To a certain extent, once you get big enough, you don't have to sell. The size of the show sells itself. And they're not, and most of the companies that are doing podcast advertising on big shows, they're not looking to do like niche specialized content for every show. It's just trying to do as big an ad buy as they can. They're just spreading their money around, right? So they're not looking to do anything fancy. It's just how many impressions can you get? How much does it cost? And that's really what it is.
Love it. Okay, let's move on here. Let's talk about challenges. What are some of the hardest things you've been through in your podcasting journey, and how did you get through them?
I think there are periods that I went through and that everyone goes through where the show kind of plateaus. I'm in the middle of that right now, and I'm looking at ways that I can basically advertise and promote myself on other podcasts. So I've been doing a lot of research. And the great thing is there are shows out there that are successful, but don't really monetize. I remember there was a show that I listened to, and then I realized, like, well, they have weird ads that they do. Like, they have very strange sponsors. And so I contacted them, and I was like, would it be possible for me to buy an ad on your show? And the show gets about 100 to 125,000 downloads per episode. So it's a pretty big show. And they said, sure. And it's a nonprofit that technically owns the podcast. So I asked them, I said, well, how much would it cost? There's like, and they really had no set fee. So they were like, well, how about we did a couple $1,000s for these episodes? I was like, well, how about $5,000 for 4 episodes? They're like, sure. The CPM that breaks down to was like a really good deal. And when I started running ads on it, I immediately saw a spike in downloads when the ads appeared. And there are quite a few opportunities like that out there, but you got to put in the legwork and find them. And that's kind of one of the things I'm working on right now, that once a show gets to a certain size, you do have to make investments in promotion in order to grow the show. That organic, and I have some very fanatical people that listen to my show. I created a thing called the Completionist Club for people that have listened to every episode. And I'm doing episode number 1,716 today. But
Congratulations.
But you need, I think, to reach a bigger audience and to do that, you need to be willing to invest in promotion.
Today's episode of Podcasting Secrets is brought to you by Pod Allies, the done-for-you podcasting services solution. When I speak with CEOs about their podcast, one of the most common comments that I hear is that they know they need a podcast, but they don't have time. Have you ever wondered how some businesses find a way to still run their podcasts while juggling their crazy day-to-day operations? The secret might be simpler than you think. Let me introduce you to Pod Allies. This is a service that's changed the game for businesses in the podcasting world. Pod Allies is a done-for-you podcast production and marketing service. They understand that while many businesses understand the immense value podcasting can have for their business, finding time to produce, syndicate, promote, and monetize a show can be challenging. Pod Allies offers a dedicated team to handle virtually all aspects of your podcast production. From strategy and branding to audio and video editing and guest scheduling, they've got you covered. They even take care of creating blog posts, transcripts, and syndicating your content across multiple platforms. What sets Pod Allies apart is their use of PodUp, their proprietary podcasting software suite. This allows them to streamline the entire podcasting process, saving you time, effort, and a bunch of money. If you're ready to become a thought leader, connect with your audience, and grow your business through podcasting without all of the investment of time and cost of doing it yourself, Pod Allies might be the perfect solution for you. To learn more or to schedule a free consultation with a podcast expert, visit podallies.com. That's podallies.com. Now back to the show. Can you tell me any other monetization strategies that you're pursuing other than advertising or that you're planning to pursue in the future?
The only thing I'm actually doing right now is Patreon, and I do next to nothing with it. And this comes into the fact that I'm doing a show every single day. So doing extra content, I don't have the bandwidth to write and research 2 shows in any given day. That's just not possible.
And do a good enough job at both.
Right. And even right now, I run reruns about twice a week just so I can have a day off. But given that I had, 1,700 episodes, I can pull a show up from 3 years ago and be confident that even if you listen to it, you probably could use a refresher. There's a lot of potential monetization paths going forward. One of which that I've looked at is to do a tour for my readers. So when I was doing travel photography, I would run photo tours, and I would fill it, but that would be like getting 12 people, and it often took a lot of work. I threw an idea out about doing a tour for my listeners 4 years ago, and I had 100 people sign up showing interest within 48 hours. And that was when the show was about 1/10 the size as it is today. So now I'm starting to think that maybe I could even rent a riverboat in Europe and fill it with 100 to 150 people and do an Everything Everywhere cruise.
I love it.
Where I and maybe some other experts would do lectures in the evening, during the day about, this is what we're going to be seeing tomorrow. This is what you're going to see at this church or at this cathedral. This is what's special about this market, something like that. So that's one possibility. I haven't sold merchandise. And a lot of people, they start doing that right away. I have people begging me for merchandise because the only way to get it right now is to be a high-level supporter on Patreon. There's only like 3 slots for that. So I think there's demand for that. And because I'm doing something different every day, there's a lot of new opportunities for things. So I just did an episode yesterday or the other day on the history of the telephone. And one of the interesting things is that we're often told in school, like Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone, and the first words spoken were, "Watson, come here, I want you." The actual first words were spoken by a German inventor about a decade earlier, and the first words spoken on a telephone were, "The horse does not eat cucumber salad," which I think would make a great shirt. But those
where did that phrase come from? Where did those
words? It's supposedly hard to hear in German or hard to enunciate. And so it was spoken in German. And that's why it was the first. It's like doing a tongue twister or something.
Oh, gotcha.
So that's why "the horse does not eat cucumber salad" was the first word spoken on through an electrical system using a wire. Call it that. So there's opportunities for that. I think I still haven't started doing subscription-based services for the show, which I think that there would be a fair amount of demand for, especially with the more fanatic.
I think that would be your best strategy of everything you could do.
Yeah. Again, it's just time. 1,700 episodes, almost 5 years now. No one has assisted me in one episode. I have done everything myself. I have no editor, no producer, no researcher, no writer. I do absolutely everything. I do the show notes. I do a unique episode for every show, or unique image for every episode. It's all me. The website, everything except selling the ads.
So at what point do you think you'll get help?
I could have, when I find the right person.
Yeah.
I put out a job request form last year, and I was shocked at both the number and the quality of the people that responded, in that there were some very, I thought, rather high-level people that had very high positions in the podcasting industry that responded. And I was like, well, why do you want to work with me? I'm a dude, it's just this one show. But I think that also a lot of people realize that there aren't a lot of shows of this size, that if you look at in the entire podcasting industry, there aren't many. Even shows in big networks, I've been able to do something that most of their shows don't do. So I think they realize the potential. So I am eventually going to, I may end up hiring just a lower level person first to help me do some of these tasks, things that can be done every day. I've given up doing any social media promotion. You asked about what rules I break. That was one of the big ones. I've completely ceased promoting the show on social media because it doesn't work. And I have tested it, and I have spent money on it. I've hired people to do customized videos for TikTok, and I gained a reasonable following on TikTok. I think I have like 18,000 people that follow me. Didn't translate into subscribers of the podcast.
All right, let's go forward to promotion. 1.5 million downloads per month. That's crazy amazing. Like you said, there's not many podcasts that are of that size. How did you get there? I know you talked about daily publishing. I know you've talked about, the quality, this effort you put into publishing. You're not doing social. What are you doing to reach those kind of numbers?
The biggest thing I did in growing the show was paid promotion. So paying to be on podcast apps. So I've bought ads on Podbean, Podcast Addict, Podcast Republic, Overcast, Castbox, Player.fm. Basically, everywhere where you can buy an ad, I have bought ads. And some work better than others. Some are better deals. But I have been doing that as soon as I could start to afford it. And you can start doing that for a couple $100 a month. And one of the exercises I did early on is I calculated what is the value to me of a podcast subscriber. If you subscribe to my show, and let's say you listen to the majority of my episodes, what is that worth? Well, podcasting ads are sold on a CPM basis, which is cost per 1,000. So if someone were to listen to my show and listen to every episode in a year, that is roughly 1/3 of 1,000, right? Because there's 365 days a year. So, and I run 2 ads on each episode. I can figure out the average value of an ad. Let's say it's around $20 to $25 CPM. So you can come up with a number that says this is the value of and the number I came up with, depending on the assumptions you want to use, is somewhere between $10 to $14 a year per subscriber to my show. So if I can acquire a new subscriber for less than that, then I'm doing pretty well. And what I figured is that by running ads on a lot of these apps, I can acquire a subscriber for somewhere between usually $1 to $3.
Wow. That's a good ROAS, good return on ad spend.
It is. And most people never go through that exercise. They do not know what the average, and for a smaller show, if you look on the other end of that dumbbell, if you're selling products and services, your average value per subscriber is probably a lot higher, right? If you're selling a course or consulting services, it may be into the hundreds of dollars potentially, because you have a smaller audience with a bigger product to sell. So that is an important exercise for anyone to go through. And I think that once you do that, then you have an idea of, oh, this is what I could spend for customer acquisition. And if they, and that's just, I'm just assuming they listen to the show for 1 year. A lot of the people have been listening for multiple years. So that figure only goes up.
Yeah. That is very smart of you. Thank you for sharing that with the audience. So the return, the acquisition cost, a lot of people call that the CAC, right? The client acquisition cost. And then the return on ad spend is the ROAS. So you know that for every dollar you spend ish, you get about $10 to $14. So you have a ROAS of 10, and you know your client acquisition cost is about $1 to, I don't remember what you said, but are there any other key statistics that you look at in your analysis to kind of guide your advertising?
Not really. I mean, there is always kind of an unknown. We don't have tracking like you do in, say, banner ads or affiliate marketing, where you can literally track someone. Podcasting just doesn't work that way. But I've done enough promotional spending to know that the difference between what it costs to acquire someone and their value, it's a pretty big gap. It is somewhere probably in the neighborhood of at least 3 to 10 times what that is. And that is a big enough gap that I don't worry too much when I'm spending money on promotion.
Of all these different channels that you've advertised on, which ones do you recommend as being the most effective?
Find a large podcast in your niche and have the host do a host read ad for you.
And just go directly to the podcast. Don't go through another platform to do it directly with the
If you're
the host.
working with another podcast, and it could be doing an ad swap if you run ads on your show. So I do a lot of those. I've had NPR, the TED Talks, very big shows, Malcolm Gladwell shows. I've done swaps with them where they will read a thing for me and I read a thing for them. That's very common. That doesn't cost anything. The problem is you need to be a certain size before you're going to get larger podcasts to do that for you. Feed drops can be very effective, where you literally put, for a show like mine that's pretty short, I can literally dump an entire episode of a show in another person's feed, and that's done very well. And then for people with smaller budgets, when you're starting out, I just recommend buying ads in apps. So
and which apps do you think would be the most effective?
Overcast is a very good one. What you're usually doing is you're buying some sort of banner ad that's going to appear in the app when people are listening for certain categories. So Overcast is one. Podcast Addict is another good one that I think work rather well. And I would probably start with those. The minimum spend is going to vary. So there are some, and every app does it completely different. So you need to kind of do some research on this. Podbean, I've had some success with, but it's a much higher spend. Pocket Casts, they promote just one podcast at a time throughout the entire app. So it's a higher spend for a shorter amount of time, but it reaches a wider audience. You just kind of have to do your homework and figure it out.
Yeah. Can you take us through your daily workflow? You say you do essentially everything yourself except the ad buying. What does your daily workflow look like as a solo creator?
Step one, I got to figure out what I'm going to do the show on that day. So I told you when I started the show, I created a list of 100 show ideas. I created that in a Google Doc, and I'm still using that same Google Doc, and I've just updated it. And I delete things when I do a show on it, and then I add more things, and there's about 935 ideas on that list now. So yesterday was a Sunday. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was like, Battle of Gettysburg. I've not done this. I think I could do this pretty easy. Battle of Gettysburg. So today I'm doing a thing on, like I said, why the alphabet is in that order. And this is an idea I've had for years, and I've kind of been putting it off because it's a bit more tricky to tell the story behind it. So today, first thing I did is I created the artwork for the show. I have a template on Adobe Express. And so all I have to do is put in an image, update the episode number, and put in a title. And then that's the episode artwork. Then I fill in all the details on Megaphone, which is the host that I use, and on my website. So each episode has a separate page where I post the entire script of the show. So I've created the basics of that. So now I have to start writing the show. I write a 30-second cold intro that I use in every single episode. I never run pre-roll ads. I believe that the first thing a person should hear is the host's voice. So I do that. I do an outro for every show where I read a review someone has left, which encourages people to leave reviews. And then I write the body of the show. I usually shoot for 2,000 words. The time it takes to do that can vary between 2 hours. I guess the longest one has probably taken me 8 hours. And then the actual recording of the show is the easiest thing I do. I use GarageBand. A monologue scripted show is trivial to edit. There's no ums, there's no ahs. You don't have to worry about I just keep talking until I flub up or I want to do it differently. And then I just move the waveform back, start at that point, and I just keep doing that until I'm done. And then when I'm done, it's done. And convert to MP3, upload.
And you're just doing it on audio?
Yes. I may do a YouTube channel in the future. There's a lot of successful educational YouTube channels that are just voiceover with B-roll footage. Yeah. Well, I got the voiceover. That's done. Maybe I might do a separate recording for YouTube and change a little thing. Sometimes I'll reference previous episodes or say this will be for a future episode. I would remove that stuff. Maybe do it in a different order. So I've thought about that, but I would need to hire a full-time YouTube person to do the video for me. I'm not going to do video and audio. But I'm also a big believer that audio is the superior platform. And a lot of people think of YouTube right away, but the fact of the matter is CPMs are much higher on audio, and you don't have to worry about the algorithm. I know a lot of YouTubers that found success with one video. Like, they have a bunch of videos that don't do very well, and then one skyrockets, and then they feel they have to constantly do whatever that was over and over and over. And then the next thing you know, that's their whole channel. With my show, I get a lot of people that say, well, what's their most popular episodes? And they're thinking it's like YouTube, and it's not. There's no algorithm that's feeding up individual episodes. So all my episodes get basically the same number of downloads. And anecdotally, when people tell me what their favorite episode is, it's all over the place. So that audience lock-in that you get on YouTube because of the algorithm doesn't exist in podcasting. And so I think it's a superior platform. The difference is everybody sees subscriber numbers and view numbers on YouTube that are public, and all that's hidden on podcasting. So they don't know how well a podcast is doing compared to, say, a YouTube channel.
Gary, thank you so much for being with us today. For our audience that's enjoyed this like I have, and they want to learn more about you and your show, what are the best ways, or maybe even they want to learn more about these tours that you're going to do, what are the best ways that they can learn about this?
Wherever you're listening to this show right now, go search for Everything Everywhere Daily and start listening. And you'll find everything you need there. I have no product to sell you. I have no services. Just listen to the show and learn something brand new every day.
Sounds great. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.